Ladies and gentlemen, could I begin by wishing you all, though somewhat belatedly, a very happy New Year and great success in your endeavor. I have been asked to talk about a good number of topics. There are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. You see, if you agree, what I intend to do is not to inflict a lecture on you, but to follow an interactive kind of, method. Essentially, following the manner in which meetings are conducted in the government. Therefore, what I would like to do, if you agree, is first to introduce the subject. Okay? And then I will divide these blessed topics into broadly 3 segments. First is software part. That is what's the importance of the interview, personality test really, and then what is expected, and what is expected from the candidate as well as from the board, and how to prepare for the interview, the formal dressing and etiquette, DAF, the second subject. Lastly, I will take over the national, international, and social issues. If you agree, fine. Now, first of all, you are appearing for certain positions in the civil service. What do you really mean by civil service? This is the first thing that you should be very clear. Now, the British definition of the civil service is all posts borne under on the civil side of the budget. So the budget has 3 components in Britain: the civil, the military, and the judicial. So all posts, regardless of the designations, borne on the civil side of the budget are what you constitute or what constitutes civil service. By this definition, a peon is a civil servant as much as the cabinet secretary. You get my point? Now you may ask me, why this British definition of civil service? Why not the French definition? The reason being that we are a common law country, quote and unquote. Are you familiar with this expression? Common law country, quote and unquote. We are a common law country, which means we follow British laws, procedures, concepts, and systems of governance, and more importantly, the British jurisprudence. The English language, therefore, is absolutely critical for conduct of public affairs, administration in this country, right? So we are a common law country. And we also follow what is called common law constitutionalism. Common law constitutionalism. Okay? Now these 2 are extremely important. I am trying to project not the view of an academic, but the experience of a practitioner who has been a part of the system, and I've seen how the system works. So we are a common law country, and we have been following common law constitutionalism, right? What are the characteristics of the common law constitutionalism? You have got to understand it, to appreciate the values of the civil service and the foundations of the civil service. Because civil service in India is the product of the constitutional growth of this country. It is not out of it. part of it, right? What are the main elements of a common law country? Or you can call it a common law system of administration, or an administration based on quote and unquote common law. First, separation of powers between executive, legislature and the judiciary. Second, independence of the judiciary, right? Third, judicial review is very important. Fourth, a scheme of rights, a kind of statement of fundamental rights and duties, right? Fifth, judge-made laws, meaning thereby that the pronouncements of the courts are what you call case laws. You must have known about Keshavananda Bharati's case, basic structure, doctrine of the Constitution. It was the outcome of a case law. Karunanidhi's case, a famous case in which the definition of a public servant was widened, broadened, expanded to include political executives holding positions in the government. So these are examples of laws made by the judges, okay? And then, very importantly, implicit in the concept is judicial activism. I find in the media some comments not really favorable about this phenomena of judicial activism, but it is a part of the system, and it is a desirable part of the system because the executives must be aware of the limitations of their power. The entire scheme of separation of powers is based on an assumption that everyone knows its limitations. Every wing of the government must be aware of its limitations, and there has to be a point where these disputes, conflicts of opinion have to be resolved, and this is the role of the courts in a common law country. Okay. Now I won't go into further details, like the ultra vires principle is a fundamental aspect of judicial review. You take an action, and it is possible for the courts to reject it. Okay? In the same manner, from this scheme, we have in India a unique phenomena, the public interest litigation. Okay? PIL. You don't have in United States, for example. US courts would not hear any such petition. But in India, Article 226 of the Constitution is considered a pillar of our system, which enables the citizen to approach the court to seek relief in case his or her fundamental right was violated or is violated, right? Now, having said this, where do we stand as a civil servant? What is civil service? Well, there is a definition of a civil service which I came across some time back. I'll ask Amit to circulate the full definition to you. This is the definition of the Organization of European Cooperation and Security, OECD. The definition seems pretty comprehensive. The essence of the definition is that, you see, civil service has several grades, but senior civil service is something important, something different. Senior civil service is what you are really trying to get into. The services which are thrown open for competition are not just civil service. Please note this point. You are really trying for senior civil service positions in the government. Now, senior civil service is defined by OECD as, I quote, structured and organized system of personnel for the higher non-political position in the government. I repeat, senior civil service is structured and organized system of personnel for the higher non-political position in the government to discharge functions that cover policy advice, operational delivery, or corporate service delivery, unquote. These are loaded words, please note. Functions that cover policy advice, operational delivery, or corporate service delivery. When you get the full definition, I just don't have it at the moment, unfortunately, you will get to see the whole structure is that senior civil service has a role different from civil service personnel discharging routine functions. What are these? Policy advice, operational delivery, and corporate service delivery. Of these three, the most important is policy advice. Okay? Now, if you happen to be an engineer and if you are asked in the interview, why do you wish to join civil service? The answer could be that I would like to be part of a system, part of the system of governance which deals with policy making, participation in the policy making process, and also implementation. And this is something that I could get if I joined the civil service. So you become a part of the, what I would like to say, borrowing a phrase used in the defense, higher direction of governance. In defense, they use a favorite expression, higher direction of what? So in the same manner, it is basically a part of the higher direction of governance. You see? So, and that higher direction includes policy formulation. Usually the media would tell you the policy is made by the elected representatives of government. But in reality, it is a participatory process in which civil servants at the higher level do take part. Not only that, they are integral, central to this process of policy formulation, right? No, we have a civil service in this country. There are civil service everywhere. In fact, by the way, civil services is ungrammatical. Somehow it's a part of the Indian English. Civil service is a generic term. What you mean by the services are the cadres, which are a part of the civil service. Plural is used to describe the services under the army, armed forces. Therefore, you have a services 11 taking part in Santosh Trophy football tournament or Ranji Trophy cricket tournament. You see, that's the reason, because Army, Navy, Air Force, these are services. Just that's by the way. Now, honestly, civil service as a profession is very different from, say, medical engineering. If you're in Myanmar dealing with power generation, the core activity of yours would not be much different from, say, in India. Your life may be affected, your rights may be affected, but as far as your profession is concerned, as a doctor or as an engineer, whether you're here or in Pakistan or in Bangladesh or Nepal, it's not much different. But in case of civil service, it is not. Civil service has a symbiotic relationship, with the form of government. Take Myanmar. civil administration in Myanmar till now is subordinate to the armed forces. 25% of seats in the lower house of Myanmar's parliament is reserved for the armed forces. Unless this constitution is amended by Madam Aung San Suu Kyi, army has an overriding role. Not only that, in the field administration, the district officials are answerable to the local army commanders. The country is divided into several zones, which are what you call military zones, where the local commander is really the boss. And the civil administration has been, during the entire military rule, subordinate to them. The point I'm trying to stress is that this relationship is to be understood. There is a symbiotic relationship between civil service and the type of government that you have in a particular country, whether it is democracy, quasi-democracy, or whatever. I think it will be useful for you to know how the civil service in India had emerged and taken its shape. This itself could be a big lecture, but let me put it across in a few sentences. See, the civil service of modern states emerged essentially in the 19th century with the emergence of nation states. In India, the concept of a modern state accountable to a legislature is essentially an outcome of the British intervention in the affairs of India. You see, in the year 1765, after the Battle of Buxar, the East India Company was granted the Diwani of the richest province of Mughal Empire, Suba, Bengal, which included the whole of Bengal and Bangladesh today, whole of Bihar, a major part of Orissa, and a part of Assam also. Now, in India traditionally, those who collected the revenue ruled the land. This grant of Diwani to a trading company, East India Company was a trading company. It was not a manufacturing company, you see. Was the first instance, in my view, in the history of the world, of privatization of government. It's a unique development. The East India Company, like a business company, a multinational company, has its own business executives. They were variously designated. The first appointment being a writer. On promotion, he becomes a factor. Factor means in charge of a factory. Factory had a different meaning in the 18th century. Factory in those days meant a godown, where you keep your blessed, merchandise, whatever. On promotion, he becomes an agent. Further promotion, he becomes chief agent. And finally, luck would have it, he would be a governor. Okay? This was the cadre structure of the East India Company. Now, after the grant of Diwani, there are 27 districts of Mughal Suba Bengal, each headed by mostly Mohammedans of Persian origin, primarily, well versed in Persian because the administration was run according to the Mohammedan law for criminal cases, and everything was done in Persian. For first 10 years, this arrangement was allowed to continue. Then it led to what was called diarchy. That is, company was responsible for collection, but actual collection was done by other people. It led to widespread distress, anarchy, famines. So, in the year of our Lord, 1773, Warren Hastings decided enough was enough. So he drove away those Indian heads of districts and appointed their own executives, who are either writers or factors or agents, and sent them as collectors. So Warren Hastings is the founder of the institution of the district magistrate and collectors in the year 1773. Then came Lord Cornwallis. In 1784, Lord Cornwallis found there was a need for separation of executive and judiciary. He created the posts of district judges, judges in circuit who would move from one district to another. You have the circuit houses everywhere. Origin of the word circuit house is in this institution of judges moving from one place to another in transit. They had to live somewhere. So judges in circuit really led to our great institution of circuit houses, to which IAS officers introduced immediately on arrival, because that was the place where you had to live. Then came Lord William Bentinck. Lord William Bentinck created the provincial civil service, all over the country. Lord Macaulay, in between, studied the existing laws and found them grossly inadequate. There was no uniform criminal code in India at that point of time. We are talking about uniform civil code, which we have not been able to give to ourselves over the last so many years. Just think of it at that point of time. There was no uniform civil code. The Mohammedan law was the law of the land in matters relating to criminal cases. So Macaulay drafted the Indian Penal Code, the Indian Evidence Act, 1861. The High Courts came. In between, Lord Cornwallis, I forgot to mention, created the basis of what you have, the police administration. The Bengal Chowkidari Act was one which I studied with great amusement, was the beginning of the process of government appointing chowkidars and making them de facto constables in charge of peace of that particular village. So on the whole, the structure of administration that we have today took some concrete shape by the year 1861, right? So, as the British power expanded, the system that was introduced in Bengal was introduced, transplanted in all other parts of the country with some local modifications. Please remember, the structure of administration that grew over the years from 1773 up to 1861 eventually became the structure of administration for the British held territories. And the worthy princes, I say worthy princes because they were loyal to the British, they also adopted the same system with some local modifications in the native states or the Indian principalities, right? So by the year 1860-65, the administration of India took a definite shape. So the interesting part that took place is that while the company staff were recruited initially on patronage, later the system of examination was introduced, largely because of the influence of France. Napoleon created merit-based civil service in France under his Code Napoleon. The British felt that they should not be lagging behind. Therefore, they also introduced system of competitive examination. And in the year 1853, this was made open to Indians. In other words, Indians were allowed to appear for examinations held in London for entry into civil service in India. By the way, prior to that in 1830, the company was debarred from getting into any kind of business activities. So it ceased to be a trading company as far as India is concerned, and a merit-based competitive examination, a merit-based system of recruitment was introduced. Indian civil service, the heaven born, was born actually in the year 1854. Right. Now, we come to what you call the central services today. Under 1919 Government of India Act, certain activities were kept as reserved for the central government. Military, audit and accounts, railways, customs, and central excise. See, posts and telegraphs. So, if you go through the provisions of Government of India Act 1919, you see how the structured central services, which are now grouped under Indian Revenue Service, you see, we have the Indian Audit and Account Service, they owe their origin to the Government of India Act 1919. What I'm trying to say is that if you look back, by and large, the system that existed continues to function. It continues. And there has been a remarkable continuity in Indian administration. So, we gave to ourselves the Constitution of India. It laid down a new relationships between the central government and the constituent state governments. But as far as the administrative structure and the system are concerned, by and large, it remained unchanged. Fundamentally, yes, Panchayati Raj institutions have been introduced. We have the fundamental rights and directive principles. But administration per se of the government at the center and at the states, by and large, are still being run, conducted, managed within the framework that I have just mentioned. So I now stop at that for the introduction part. And I've discussed with you the civil service, its basic, structure, and the role of the senior civil service particularly, and how our system had evolved. If you have any question, you are free to ask me. If you need any clarification.
So what in case if suppose the interview board asks us more details of all these acts and we are not able to tell them? There are certain questions. What is 1909 Act, 1900, 19 Act?
You see, I have mentioned this to you just to give an idea. They don't expect you an expert kind of opinion on the subject. They want your familiarity with the subject. If only you could tell them, yes, Warren Hastings founded the District Administration of India, they will be more than satisfied. All I'm trying to say is that this understanding is necessary to place you, to put you in a proper perspective. That this is what civil service is all about. And that is how it has evolved over the years. Okay? Any other question? And let me tell you that it is not material whether you have studied this subject or that subject. What is important is whether you have thought over seriously about the career that you are seeking to opt for. And you know some basics about what the system is all about and what you are expected to do. Policy advice, for example. Are you equipped for that? So for that purpose, your education, your outlook must be broad enough to be able to take a kind of a mature view covering various aspects into your work as an administrator, as a person implementing a program, as well as advising the government on policy issues. These are very critical. A general understanding of the principles of governance is what is required. And some facts are pretty important. For example, if somebody asks you about the role of Ambedkar, you should be able to say that he was chairman of the drafting committee. So these facts must be on your fingertips. Fine. Now we go over to the next part, if you don't have anything else to ask. Now, importance of civil service interview.
Sir, in common law constitutionalism, you pointed out a few points you told us. So in that, so you mentioned both judicial review as well as judicial activism. So in your opinion, what is the difference between these two?
You see, judicial review is a fact. That is, a case is brought before the learned judge and he gives an opinion. Judicial activism is an attitude of mind, willingness to hear public grievances, willingness to entertain a petition. Now, for example, this attitude doesn't exist in Pakistan. In Pakistan, Sharia law is outside the scope of the Supreme Court. Okay? In fact, the Constitution of Pakistan begins with a sentence that whereas sovereignty over the entire universe belongs to Almighty Allah alone, and the authority to be exercised by the people of Pakistan within the limits prescribed by him as a sacred trust. So, it goes on to state that wherein the Muslims shall be enabled to order their lives in the individual and collective spheres in accordance with the teachings and requirements of Islam as set out in the Holy Quran and Sunnah, unquote. So, in the Pakistani system of law and justice, the highest court has no say in the matter of disposal of cases by the Sharia courts. Therefore, if a person is aggrieved, he cannot go to Supreme Court. So, point I'm trying to say is that while judicial review is a part of the scheme, the judicial activism depends on the individual judges, how strongly he feels about a particular matter that is brought before him. He may dismiss it if he thinks that it is not. So here, a tremendous responsibility is given to the judge presiding over the court. It is for him to decide. So activism is essentially the manner in which you exercise the power of judicial review and your perception of how this power should be exercised. So that depends on the individual member of the judiciary. That's the point, okay? Fine, now we come to the interview part. You see, I understand that the full marks are 275, is it? Okay. Now, given the fact that the marks in the mains, I find from the newspaper reports, have plateaued more or less around 55% or so, the importance of this gets more and more. You see, if the marks get plateaued, then whatever you score in the interview would be absolutely critical. It could make a huge difference in every way. In the matter of allotment of your service, and also if you get into the all India service, then the allotment of your state, it all depends on state of your choice. I mean, it depends on this. Now, first thing that you should keep in mind, that you have earned the right to be interviewed. It is not anybody's favor. Nobody has given you a favor, or nobody is doing an act of great favor. Nothing. You have earned it by virtue of your success in the mains examination. It's a matter of right. Depends on how you exercise that right. It is your right. It is a right-based approach that I would like you to sort of consider. You know, it is a right-based approach that you should adopt when you approach the interview. You must be familiar with the rights-based approach to development these days, a part of the hackneyed language. Anyway, pardon me. So this is most important. And you should feel confident and never diffident. Nothing of the sort. You are, you know, what you say, you are a person who has acquired a chip on his shoulders. You know? Or you are a bit above the rest. You should not be unhappy about it. You should not feel overburdened. That is like a cross that I am carrying. No. You should be proud of that fact that you have earned a right. And when you get into this waiting hall, you should not bother about the demeanor of other candidates. That's something important. You see, you might find a candidate very flashy, speaking, you know, accented English. I remember having met a candidate who immediately announced that I was a graduate of Cambridge, I went to King's College, and that kind of thing. Don't bother about it, you see. There will be such people always in every gathering. Keep your cool and have faith in God and in yourself, and feel confident that whatever you did is your karma, okay? And it is your karma that enabled you to do well in mains, not anybody's grace, your effort. And you're now ready for the final act. And don't worry much about the result. Heaven is not going to fall. Life is a long journey, a continuous process. You never know which direction your life will take. And have faith in the true spirit of Gita. So my first part is that it is important, it's critical for your entry into the service, but at the same time, you must have an appropriate mental kind of preparation for that. Well, two personal tips. You see, a week before you appear for interview, don't attend any strenuous social or other function where you might overeat, you might overexert yourself, and in the process, you might lose your concentration. So therefore, the first 7 days, it could be 10 days, depending on a person's mental and physical framework, but it is advisable not to expose yourself to any kind of, you know, serious extracurricular activity, unconnected with your preparation for the interview, for at least a week before that, right? Now, about the interview board. You see, I have given some thought to this matter. You see, who constitutes this board? UPSC constitutes the board. Union Public Service Commission will constitute the board. And who are the people who constitute the board? Now, it consists of a fair mix of serving and retired officials and experts. And there will be a member of the UPSC invariably in this, to the extent possible. Now, the serving officers are those who retired at the highest level, namely Secretary to the Government of India. There might be an retired Army General also, at the level of Lieutenant General or equivalent, and academics or professionals of national repute who will be a part of the experts group, right? And they are carefully chosen, I believe, based on their aptitude and capacity for assessing the candidate's potential, character, and caliber. Just try to imagine the board members, and you might perhaps prepare a pen picture of them. Just try to imagine. Mostly in their late 50s. Most of them, all of them, will be in their late 50s. if they're serving officers who have climbed up the ladder on the system that you are trying to join and reach to the level of secretary. The vision of such people is likely to be again a mix of hope and healthy cynicism. This I could say from my own experience, that as you grow old, you develop a mix of all kinds of thoughts. It's a group which I can guess that they would have a kind of mental framework in the sense that they may not be particularly happy at the current state of affairs, but still hoping for a breakthrough. And thus, on the whole, they have a positive attitude. A positive attitude to deal with this matter. Meeting young people is a great pleasure. For some of them, they might find it very interesting. So, the mental preparation is also necessary for the board member to meet youngsters like you with a positive bent of mind, and much depends on how such board members prepare themselves for this task. This I can say from my experience that unless the board members come prepared and give some thought before they reach the UPSC, it might be difficult for them. You know, it's a job that requires a lot of concentration. Now, retired bureaucrats are carefully drawn up from different services to get an objective feedback, and they are the people who come prepared usually to ask questions. They come prepared because they are usually not having any other work. Therefore, they could spend time, study some background papers, and reach this point. Now, they would ask questions mainly to draw you into a discussion. It is not a quiz competition. It is not. It is essentially a mechanism to draw you into some kind of a discussion. The third element is the official experts. Now, they will observe your candidate's response to test their mental alertness and psychology. That is, whether he's emotional, excitable, and whether his response mechanism is steady and logical. These experts are well known, and it would be useful to know upon arrival at the venue the composition of the board. During our time, this was made available to the candidates on arrival. I don't know the system now, but it might be useful for you to know when you are waiting at the hall who are the members of the board. So, one thing you must be sure that this is, on the whole, a positive mechanism, and they are conscious of the responsibility of being called upon to select the senior civil service cadres of the government. And you are the people who will lead and drive the system right from the early stage. The board, therefore, will be keen to meet you and have high expectation. It is the candidate's task to capitalize on this situation. You see, this is very important. It's much like a batsman who goes to bat, and if the pitch is good, it is up to him to make use of the pitch. You see? And you have to capitalize on the goodwill that exists in the board who had gone through your, DAF. Now, be prepared to discuss a wide range of subjects with emphasis on current affairs and what might have taken place on the day or shortly before the interview, and such matters should not surprise you at all, which would give you a good start. A few things. The interview may be held at Dholpur House. They might ask you, what was this building about? Why is it called Dholpur? What is Dholpur? You see? Now, why are so many houses in Delhi known as, say, Hyderabad House, Bikaner House, etc.? This might lead to a discussion about how the princely states were integrated into, and the role of Sardar Patel. So, before you enter, please collect some information about the building where UPSC is located, and the broad issue of integration of states. And the statue of Sardar Patel, which is being erected, might come up also in that connection. The other thing is very important is that the experts are drawn from different parts of India. Their manner of speaking, the style, etc., could be different. So, the way they speak could be as well different. So, what you should do is, first of all, listen to the matter raised carefully. Even if you know, don't give a pat reply. Give a pause to give an impression that you are a thinking person, that you want to absorb the matter before you react to it. And that is extremely important. Because if you give a pat reply, there is a chance that you might get into a problem. You might say something which you didn't want to say. It happens because the mind will be somewhat tense. So the golden rule for any success in interview is that give a pause, listen to the question carefully. And if you don't know, say honestly, no sir, I don't know about it. They will be happy to divert it to some other subject and appreciate your frankness, appreciate your honesty, right? Second part, a connected issue really, is your body language. See, body language is what you call in legal terms demeanor. Demeanor includes your dress, your shoes, your socks, your hairstyle, everything put together. Now, in criminal cases, we have to always comment on the demeanor of the witness. The witness comes, he tells something. What he says is not taken on its face value. A judge or a magistrate has to comment on the demeanor of the witness. So the word demeanor here means your body language plus your manner of speaking. So you should prepare yourself in a manner that gives an impression that you are attuned to some discipline, healthy habits, and qualities of self-restraint, and respectful of your superiors. It's very important that your responses, even when you disagree, must be respectful. The idea is that you must project yourself as a person willing to learn, abide by the rules, and therefore you are prima facie capable of enforcing the same. See, essentially, you are going to administer. You yourself should have that kind of a mental and physical kind of makeup to add up to their expectation. So this impression has to be created immediately, fast, because the first impression usually lasts. First impression is very important, right? Now, if you look at it honestly, it is like a hurdle race. The competitive examination is a hurdle race. The first hurdle you have crossed. As in all hurdle races, the first hurdle has to be crossed with the utmost speed. After that, there's a little pause. Then you cross the second hurdle. The third hurdle is generally the toughest, because by the time you have spent some of your energy. So interview is like your third hurdle, and you should reserve your cool, your thoughts, and restrict your expression to the point. What the board would like to see in you is your capacity to think, capacity to articulate. These are qualities essential to be a leader. The leadership qualities require this: capacity to think, articulate, and therefore you are in a position to take a decision and carry forward, right? and in a disciplined manner. So, what would be the main criteria apart from this? Why is this emphasis on current affairs, etc.? I go back to the civil service. Civil service essentially deals with public affairs, public laws, public grievances, public interest, and public administration. So, it is necessary to show that you have the capacity, potential to understand, appreciate the interrelationships of various matters which constitute public affairs. Now, this is very important. What's the difference between public affairs and affairs of a company or a multinational? The main difference is the objects are limited in case of a corporate enterprise. Manufacture this product, sell it, earn profit, share dividends with the shareholders, and think of expansion. The sky is the limit. In case of public affairs, it is not so. It deals with several interrelationships, seemingly unconnected, but they are connected. I give you an example. Some years ago in 1995, Supreme Court ordered that Taj Mahal area, getting blackened. Therefore, they imposed restriction on use of polluting, fuels. Consequently, what happened? The supply of subsidized fuel, gas, led to increase of industries in that area, and the overall pollution level did not show any improvement. So this shows how difficult it is to make a public policy. This odd even experience in Delhi is also one example of that. There are several factors which go into creation of a public problem, that is problem faced by the public. And there are several interrelationships which have to be resolved properly to deal with these problems. So one would expect you to have a clear understanding of public affairs, national and international, and especially those affecting India. Public policy covering a whole range of issues presently in the public domain and public interest in areas such as environment, education, poverty alleviation, inequality, upliftment of disadvantaged sections of the population, empowerment of women, are these important. But more importantly, capacity to put across views based on reason and conviction. Now this is important. You must give an impression that you know about the subject and you are somewhat committed about it. So if the issue of untouchability is raised, you have to make a very clear statement on this matter. Or if there are gender issues, you also have to be familiar with the laws made and give an impression that you have thought over this matter and you have a concrete opinion on the subject. This is important. A vague answer, a diplomatic answer would not do. We would like to see the evidence of your thinking capacity and capacity to arrive at a conclusion. Okay? Now this essentially is what is expected by the board. Any question on that?
Sir,
Yeah.
Suppose they ask, what is the correlation between the good governance and corporate governance?
Pardon me?
Suppose they ask, what is the correlation between the good governance and corporate governance? Because governance, again, comes in the domain of the public policy. And if the question is raised, and you are asking, you are telling us to put forward the thinking, that bring the things at a conclusion.
Okay. You might say that the good governance by the government, is broader in its scope. And primarily, in today's environment, it would include transparency. And this applies to corporate governance also. Transparency is a common thing. Efficiency. a corporate which doesn't produce profits will go out of the market. In case of government, efficiency in the matter of delivery of services to the government, to the people, the quality of service. Okay. So like this, you can elaborate the idea. You see, essentially, corporate enterprises are to be run in the interest of the shareholders. The whole idea of the Companies Act is really extension of the concept of democracy to economic management. See, if you look at history, the growth of democracy in Europe and the growth of the companies took place in the same period. A common shareholder, by buying a share of 10 rupees, etc., could be the owner of a company. So this is a kind of democracy. So therefore, those who run a corporate body are answerable to the shareholders. The shareholders must be interested in running it efficiently. So transparency, efficiency, and social responsibility. Responsibility to the shareholders as well as responsibility to the society. Now, therefore, CSR as a concept that has come about. Now, CSR includes a whole range of activities. In other words, a company cannot pollute and argue that I need to pollute to earn profit. So here there is a clash. So in such cases, we will say that there are some common parameters. One, transparency, efficiency, concern for environment, social responsibility, and honesty and probity. The commodities which are selling in the market should be as per the quality that you have mentioned, on the label of this particular commodity. So like this. Any other question?
So what in case if the board asks 4 or 5 questions continuously without pause, one after the other? So how should be our strategy to answer such question?
Then you keep quiet. Pause. You see? Keep quiet and then establish eye contact to the chairman. Chairman will understand what you have in mind. Then he will direct you to respond to the question usually raised by the member nearest to you. You see, eye contact is very important. You see, 4 or 5 questions are unlikely to be raised together because then there will be no impact. So suppose somebody intervenes in the middle, 2 members sort of join a discussion. Then what you should do is to look at both of them, take a longer pause, and give your reply. That is the way to deal with it. Yes, any other?
Sir, earlier you were explaining about the evolution of civil services in India.
Pardon me?
Earlier you were explaining about the evolution of civil services in India. So if they ask, sir, is the current civil services free from that colonial mindset of the British days? Or is it more inclusive in character today? So how to answer?
The answer is very simple. Sir, we are a common law country. That's all. We are a common law country, and in our administration, we follow the British laws. For example, a major aspect of common law is sanctity of the procedure. If procedural irregularity is committed, it is violation of procedural rights. Okay? I'll give you an example. Are you aware of this Hindi expression, das namburi? Do you know this origin? Any of you? No. ये 10 नंबरी है. आजकल सब 10 नंबरी ये बन गया. Its roots are Section 110 of the Code of Criminal Procedure. Under Section 110 of the Code of Criminal Procedure, the district magistrate or a magistrate has the power to serve a show cause notice on a person as to why, in view of his bad behavior, in view of his antisocial activities, such as being a habitual, offender of certain offenses, being a habitual recipient of stolen property, or being a person who harbors persons inimical to the peace and security of the area, why he should not be asked to give an undertaking with surety or without surety. He should give an undertaking that he shall not do anything which will lead to breach of peace or tranquility. Now, imagine the person who gets such a notice. And then he has to look for a lawyer and he has to file an affidavit saying that I'm not a bad person, I'm a very good person. I have not done anything that you have mentioned. And therefore, the learned magistrate will go through the submission, written as well as oral by the lawyer, and come to a conclusion that whether he is a bad fellow or not, he will write, whereas I am satisfied that you so and so have appeared and given this kind of a defense of yourself, but I am not satisfied with your defense. You are still a threat to the security and peace of this area. You deposit 2,000 rupees and present yourself in the morning sharp at 7 o'clock at the police station every week on such and such date. And in the meantime, don't do anything which will give me further cause for enhancing the security or extend the period. The period is, say, 6 months, 3 months. However, if you behave well, then I would consider withdrawing this notice in due course. Now, it ruins the prestige and standing of the individual in the village society. Okay? Now, most important thing is show cause. Now, if a magistrate immediately asks him to sign without giving him a show cause, he violates the procedural rights of the person. So, procedural rights are extremely important. And this is one thing that we have got from the common law countries. You see, in common law countries, procedural rights are as sacrosanct as your fundamental rights. That is, without showing a show cause notice, income tax officer cannot really confiscate your property like that. So this whole concept of procedural rights is built into the Indian legal and constitutional system. You see this controversy about imposition of president's rule in Arunachal Pradesh. The issue that is raised before the principal, before the court, is that whether the procedure was duly followed by the governor. Okay, fine. Does this satisfy you? Okay. Any other question? Yeah, please. You see, I can tell you from experience, this is unlikely to happen. At the most, a member may intervene when you are responding to a matter to seek some clarification. This is a sign of your doing well. In the sense, you have been able to create interest in the minds of other members by your reply. So you take a positive view that my reply is so interesting that the members got interested. So I hold my position. Take a longer pause and respond to each one of them. But remember, the eye contact is important. This reminds me that when you enter the interview room, if there is a lady, please wish her first. Bow gently to all. And when you leave, you do the same. That will come later. But in this, the purpose, your whole exercise should be to create a favorable impression. Don't create the impression that you are a revolutionary or you are a social reformer, or you are here to sort of change the society. Or, as one candidate said, to give to the society by getting the service, whatever I got for it. Frankly, this does not carry much conviction. Because the members might thought, if you are so socially concerned, you should have joined an NGO. You should have been a social activist, environment activist or whatever. But you have come to be a part of the system. You see, remember, systems throughout the world essentially stand for status quo, self-preservation. We have to preserve our own interests. That's what everybody is concerned about. So, awareness of the social problems does not indicate, should not indicate in your replies, a kind of commitment to the extent of joining a movement. No. You see, the point I'm trying to say is that suppose there is the issue of landless farmers, agriculturists in India. India has 10 crores of landless agricultural laborers. Manrega is precisely a program to give them work, because they get on the whole 145 days of work in a year. So what would they do for the rest of the year? So therefore, the concern from them does not lead to you to support a Naxalite kind of a view on the problem. That would be disastrous. So you have to give the impression of being a person with a balanced kind of mind. You see? Don't take an extreme stand, because it is difficult to hold an extreme stand. You won't be able to defend it. Right? Any other? Again? Yeah, madam, please.
As a continuation, does this mean that we have to agree to the government's?
No, not at all, not at all. No. You see, after all, you are not a part of the government. So the government will not be much bothered about your agreeing with the government policy or not. See, they will not bother. So if you feel that the government stand in Pakistan, for example, in our Indo-Pak relations, is correct, the dialogue should continue. That's the view of an enlightened citizen. And you are not the only one. There are many people who feel it. So whenever you support or oppose any stand, please remember, you are reflecting as much your personal opinion as the views of a certain group of well-informed citizens of the matter. Right? Yes?
You said that avoid taking an extreme stand. Does that also apply to situations where certain ethical or philosophical considerations?
Just as?
For example, if the issue of supporting the death penalty comes up, that what is your stand on it? So suppose today I believe that I'm firmly opposed to the death penalty on human rights, on the ground of human rights violations, and so that is an extreme stand.
Well, but you see, it depends on how you put it across. If you say that I am totally opposed to death penalty, but you say, I feel, sir, on a balance of all considerations, and taking the view that there are, two opinions on this subject, there is a strong case for abolition of death penalty. That will meet the, what you call the ends of justice. I feel, sir, there are various views on the subject, but I feel that there is a strong case. You need not say, I strongly feel. That makes a difference. Okay? Right.
Sir,
Yes.
मेरे क्वेश्चन बहुत ही एक्सेप्शनल है एखादा अनकोऑपरेटिव बोर्ड है सर क्वेश्चन पूछा आपने वी आर नॉट एबल टू आंसर दिस एंड दे रिप्लाई या तुम डॉक्टर कैसे क्या बने यार हाउ टू फेस सच सिचुएशंस नाउ एंड देन
You are a doctor and you are trying to get into IAS. Is that the question? No, I couldn't get you.
suppose they ask me something on my background
Hmm.
and I am not able to answer them properly
नहीं, बैकग्राउंड में क्या सवाल पूछ सकते हैं आपको?
सर बोले तो एखादा रिफैम्पिसिन का डोज क्या है व्हाट इज द सिग्निफिकेंस ऑफ रिफैम्पिसिन इन डॉग्स एंड आई एम
What is the significance of? I could not follow you. Can you? आप यहाँ आ जाए ना. Why don't you come here?
If the board asks like about some medicine
Hmm.
and he's not able to answer that,
About medicines.
about some medicine, supposing he's a doctor,
Huh.
he might be a doctor, I don't know, and they ask some questions regarding his medical field or profession.
Well, the answer is very simple. I haven't treated a patient who needed this.
बस यार तुमको इतना भी नहीं आता यार तुम डॉक्टर कैसे क्या बन गए
Then keep quiet. Keep your cool. This is to provoke you. Basically, if a member goes to the extent of saying so, he wants to test. He wants to find out whether you are an excitable person or not. Then you should keep quiet. I know of a particular case where a candidate comes from a place where there is a famous museum. So he was asked, what does a museum stand for? And he said confidently, sir, to preserve the past for the benefit of the future. he gave a philosophical kind of reply. Then he explained that in a museum there are artifacts, etc., which tell you our glorious past. Then he was asked, when did you visit the museum last? Did you ever visit the museum? He said, no, sir. He said, you see, then the chairman got little annoyed. He said, you see, you said that it is to preserve the riches of the past for the benefit of the future generations. But people like you don't visit this museum at all. Then the opposite candidate told, sir, I beg your pardon, when I get back to my home, the first thing that I'll do is to visit the museum. You see, that is what is expected. A bit of sense of humor, and you should be able to, and humility. You see, there's a relationship between humor and humility. Humor is an exceptional kind of expression of human mind. Humor is what makes life worth living. And if you want to raise the pitch of discussion, you are inviting troubles. So make the environment friendly, informal, and cooperative. It has to be cooperative. And one way to do it is that you must not forget that you are the object of attention. They are all looking at you. You are the object of their attention. They are watching you, how you react. And these responses count hell of a lot. Sorry, count a lot. Count a lot. Okay? Fine. Why I said pat reply is not to be given. You see, the culture of the service, by and large, was shaped by the British. This I realized the moment I joined. There are certain British English phrases which have been ingrained in the psyche of the bureaucrats. There's a saying in England, a man who gives a pat reply is not exactly a reliable fellow. There's a saying in England, a man who gives a pat reply is not a reliable person. So, a person who is thoughtful takes time to respond. And humor is what is expected of a gentleman. It's a quality of a gentleman. And it's a quality which will stand you in taste when you get into the service. Fine? Any other? Okay. My God. Now, what should you do to prepare for the interview? You know, the reading part of it. Now, you must be reading daily newspapers, etc., and absorb current issues. But what is important is that you have to form your own opinion. And may I suggest something? That before you go for interview, you stand before a mirror. Stand before a mirror for a while and observe how you appear and speak. This is to practice modulation of your voice and to see whether you put the right emphasis and don't allow yourself to prolong the conversation unnecessarily. This is very important. Now, standing before the mirror is something that Winston Churchill practiced throughout his life. Before he appeared before the House of Commons and made his famous speeches, Churchill would always stand before the mirror. There is nothing wrong in your doing it. Second, you see, you must know how to stop. I found during very mock interviews that the candidates have a tendency to hang on to the subject and continue. No. That is an indication of you're being a driver who doesn't know how to apply the brake. He only presses the accelerator. So you have to stop on your own once you are sure that you have made a point. Any question on that? You see, a matter is raised in the form of a question. The moment you think that you have finished whatever you have to say, stop on your own. Don't continue and prolong the conversation, because there is a danger you might get into some other subject. That while making your response, you might give a clue or might transgress into other areas. So therefore, this is the quality of self-restraint, intellectual self-restraint. Intellectual restraint is required. That I have made my point and I stop. Need not wait for any of the board members to intervene and to tell you to stop, right? When you read newspapers, please see that you read the newspapers of the day when you appear for the interview, and if anything important had happened, you please note it, national as well as international. Now, next is your preferences. You see, your DAF is very important. You see, when I look at the DAF, you see, it seems to be a kind of a horoscope, except that it is written by the candidate himself. See, horoscopes are written by others, but here a candidate gives his own horoscope. Now, it gives a plain picture to the board that this is what the candidate is with your photograph. And you have to live up to that. And if you have indicated some team games like football, cricket, please check some basic rules of the games, like the size of the goalpost, height of the goalpost, or the size of a cricket ground, or the distance between 2 wickets. And be sure that you are assuming that you are a sports buff, aware of the present problems of administration of sports in India. There's a controversy about the Volleyball Association a few days back. There are also match fixing cases and things like that. So you are expected to give some credence that you have understanding of the games that you play, which means you have a serious bent of mind, right? If you give other hobbies, including, say, your social and community work, please be sure that you know the outcome of your effort. The question will be, what have you achieved? You have done community work, etc., but what have you achieved? So this question must be important. Finally, reading habits. Quite a few of you might have penned down reading. A wide reading is an essential requirement of a civil servant of the higher level. Why? It is indicative of your interest in other cultures, other subjects, meaning other disciplines, and your value systems. Now, interest in other cultures is very important for those who are seeking entry into all India services, because you might be asked to work in a state away from your home, learn another language, and live in the midst of people who are seemingly different from you in many ways. And also to those who opt for foreign service. Reading habits is extremely important. And if you indicate that yes, I read, you must be able to state what exactly do you read. If you talk about crime thrillers, etc., it might give an impression not really favorable. But reading habits should include really what you read. But if you have reading habits confined to only to those matters, then it's better not to mention it. Because some evidence we would like to see of interest in other cultures. This was a major strength of the Indian civil service. You heard about Alan Octavian Hume? He's the founder of the Congress. But he will be remembered longer as the India's first modern ornithologist, the birds of India. that he authored continues to be the first book on ornithology. He observed when he was collector at Ottawa, the birds of the area, sketched, observed their behavior, and laid the foundation of ornithology as a subject in this country. There are many such examples. So, well, anything on this? On your reading habits, etc.? Now your background, you asked me about your background, etc. There are a few small things which are needed. If you had gone to a school, the name of which bears that of a great man, please be sure who was that person and know something about it. I remember a candidate who came, who had gone to Lady Shriram College. When she was asked, she could not say who was Lady Shriram was, you know. So it's not expected that you had gone to a college and you didn't bother to know who the founder of this college was or whose name the college was constituted. Like this, dates of their establishments. Suppose an old institution, when was it established? Who ran it? If it is an institution connected with a social movement, like DAV institutions, Arya Samaj movement, you ought to know about Arya Samaj movement, how it started, and like that. Because in the beginning, when you are not yet settled down, if you are asked, Mr. So-and-so, you went to so-and-so school. I find that school was founded by so-and-so person. Who was he? I don't know, sir. Gone. The conclusion will be, here is a man who lacks curiosity. Curiosity, inquisitiveness, is a primary quality needed. Okay? Then, very importantly, if you have some strong opinions, say on certain issues of sensitive nature, please see that your views are expressed in a moderate manner. You should not, even if you hold such a view, should not express it in a manner. You have got to rein your horses in your mind, discipline yourself, that on such a sensitive issue, I would not commit myself. At any case, your being a part of it, or your committing it doesn't make any difference at all. This is not the subject we are discussing. It is your opinion and your character. Important thing is your character, which is reflected in this kind of replies. Say, I mentioned about matters like award wapasi, or ghar wapasi, or the politics of food habits, the issue of intolerance. On these matters, your views should be within the framework of the Indian Constitution. Please remember, Indian Constitution is what we gave to ourselves, and the values enshrined in the Indian Constitution are shared by all. So it will be absolutely appropriate for you to rely on the values enshrined in our Constitution. Okay. Now, on the preparation of DAF, there are several points, frankly. It contains, for instance, your list of service preferences, okay? And list of state preferences, okay? Now, when I go through this, it gives you a plain picture of your pride and prejudices, both, and your inclinations, that you want to stay close to your home, and this strong preference for some to revenue service or income tax in that order, and unwillingness to serve away from your own turf to places like J&K, Northeast, etc. These might invite a question because they project an image of a person. Do you agree?
Yes.
It does project. Okay. Now, you have to stand by your preferences. Now, if you have given a very low preference to the foreign service, which I find rather shocking. In our times, the elite would go to the foreign service, the first 10 or 20. If you give revenue service a preference, if you give any other service, you have to justify. You have to justify. And that is your personal opinion. Could anybody help me to suggest what should be the kind of preference? Say, I ask you this question. Mr. So-and-so, you have opted for revenue service, income tax, etc., well above police and IPS and other services. What's the reason for that? What would be your reply? Just think over it, okay? Then, why do you indicate unwillingness to go to far-off places in India? Are these not parts of the country? Are these areas not integral to your country? Number one. Number two, are you afraid of facing the challenges? This question. You don't want to go to J&K or Northeast. How do you reply? See, the straightforward approach will be, sir, I am interested in these areas. Don't divert the question to some other, direction. Instead of answering, because you might say that, sir, I am interested in these areas, in the problems of these areas. It is not that I am totally indifferent. So what you have to say is that, sir, I am interested. I am keenly observing the situation in J&K, Northeast, Naga peace talks, etc., etc. I am deeply interested in that. And after I get selected, I'll give a serious thought. So it is somewhat premature now for me, but my not giving high preference to these areas does not mean that I am not interested in the area. This impression if you give, then the board will go to some other matter. Okay? As far as service preference is concerned, you might say that revenue service means posted in urban areas. I'll be more comfortable. Frankly, that is what many people feel. Then I'm interested in financial administration more than general administration. I'd like to specialize like this. So there are various ways of dealing with these questions, but primarily you should appear to be sincere. Whatever you say, it should be a sincere, honest, and straightforward reply, right? Finally, sometimes you may see that the members are talking about themselves, maybe about what you have said. Don't intervene. That will be disastrous. You see, it will be a natural calamity, something like that. You let them speak among themselves. You are not to intervene in that. You will intervene only when they establish eye contact with you. Only when they establish eye contact with you. Okay? Now, when you are asked to comment on a matter, like say Nerega, or say the Indo-Pak dialogue, Don't give a lecture. This temptation to give a lecture should be avoided. Briefly state the points you want to make. Because if you're interrupted, then probably your point will not be complete. So answer should be precise, but not long. You should not hang on unnecessarily for this purpose, right? And once your interview is over, please rise from the seat gently, not in a hurry, as though you are relieved of an ordeal. No, no. You should rise gently, you see? You should rise gently and then bow also gently to thank the board with your eyes to the chairman first and then to other members, and say goodbye and depart. And when you depart, see that the door is properly closed. I mean, you need not bang the door while you get out of it. No. This you should observe when you enter into the hall. What kind of door is that? Does it open gently with a bit of effort or not? Okay? So, we have completed everything else except the last part in this segment, that is formal dressing and etiquette. You see, I have prepared a kind of synopsis, which I guess would be circulated to you. We have got it already? Okay. Any question on that, on the formal dressing and etiquette? Well, I have, yeah, please.
Etiquette, when we enter and when we are leaving, we address the chairperson first, and then we have to address the other members.
No, that will be, this will create a confusion, because you will be saying goodbye to 5-6 persons, goodbye, 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 etc. It will leave a jarring note, as they say. So if you say goodbye and bow, a lot of things can be expressed without speaking. Communication is not always oral. You see, communication can be spiritual also. So when you bow gently and say goodbye to the chairman and bow towards the other members, I think you have done your job. Okay?
So while leaving that interview, so here, I'm the same person. So those guys, they ask, are you interested in asking any question to us?
First, don't use the word guys.
So those respected gentlemen,
Yeah, correct. That's better, yeah.
they will ask, are you interested in asking any question to us while leaving? So is it wise to ask them any question?
No, sir, thank you. That would be appropriate answer. Because the only question that you would have asked, sir, how did I fare? Isn't it? Is that an intelligent question to ask? You ask yourself. No. You will embarrass them by asking this question. Sir, मैंने कैसे किया, आपका performance कैसे हुआ? Who will say नहीं, तुमने कुछ नहीं किया? So you are embarrassing them. Don't raise this question. No, sir, thank you. The impression that you should create when such a question is raised, most unlikely, I feel though, that, sir, thank you very much, suggesting that you have been grateful to them for the time and the interest they have shown, in talking to you. And by your modesty, you may add some extra marks to the assessment. The last score, so to say, of the last ball of the over, this could be a sixer. If you say thank you, maybe this question was designed to test your character. And if you say, sir, kaise kya, please, how did I fare? Then say, this man he doesn't have the executive ability. One of the major elements of an officer-like quality is that you should leave major decisions to your boss, if necessary. avoid getting into a kind of a confrontation. This is actually a psychological confrontation. Why? Confrontation should be avoided as far as possible. This is a part of life, right? Now, formal dress. You see, earlier the interviews were held generally in winter, cold weather season, February, March, April, like that. And it was more or less obligatory that everybody would put on a suit. A business suit, a gray suit. You must have seen how the Japanese dress on TV. Japanese are impeccably dressed. Gray suit, various shades of gray, matching socks, and black Oxford shoes, and striped ties or spotted ties. Shirt is white. No sports shoes. It might give an impression that you are casual in your approach. And no white socks. Your matching socks should be there. I recommended 2 pairs of shoes, Oxford or Brogue. Brogue is what is commonly used by the British civil service officers. When I saw them, it is somewhat associated with the civil service. The pair of shoes that I am wearing now is a Brogue. This is what is called Brogue. Okay. For the ladies, it is more difficult, because while men tend to be uniform, more or less of the same type, women are different from different parts of the country, etc., etc. So, my suggestion to you is that if you wish to wear a suit, make sure that it is something that you normally wear while attending a formal business occasion. Say if you are teaching or if you are going to a lecture, it should be a formal dress. You see? And a sari of sober color, hairdo, and minimum makeup, and a pair of low-heeled shoes. Your demeanor is most important. Remember, you are facing a group of old men. That should be important. Men who are in their late 50s, or maybe their late 60s also. So therefore, they would have generally a conservative bent of mind. By and large, they would have. So they would expect you, they would try to picture what kind of officer this lady would make. Would she be able to command men, mostly unruly, you see, in certain environments, staff management, enforce discipline, and at the same time, in a gentle manner, that extracts work for them. So you must bear it in mind and dress accordingly, that you don't take care that you don't give a non-serious look. That is most important. Your makeup, your this, etc., must not give an impression that you are a kind of a non-serious person. Then they might say, this is not your cup of tea, or this is not your job. You might as well do something else. Ladies who have been in scientific research organizations or engineering or other professions must bear in mind that you are carrying a culture of science and technology. What is the basis of your technological education? First, it is based on reason, calculations, dynamics, reason. Second, you are trained to solve problems. Problem solving is what technical education is all about. Okay? So therefore, if you are asked why we have been to IIT, etc., we would like to join civil service, the appropriate answer would be, sir, my intellectual training, my training as an engineer, etc., has equipped me with the faculty of reason and capacity of problem solving. After all, what is mathematics? It's all about solving problems. So, and I feel that the intellectual equipments that I have acquired will stand me in good state if I am entrusted with work of multifarious nature. I am fully equipped to deal with policy issues because I have the backup of reason and problem solving quality. If you are an IIM graduate, still better. You could say I have been only trained to manage matters efficiently to the satisfaction of the people who count. And that is, I think, a quality which will stand me in good state when I take up a position in the senior civil service. Is that all? That is what should be your stand. Don't be diffident. Let them not give you an impression that you are not cut out to become so. No, I am really cut out. I am more than cut out. That should be your approach. Fine? If you wear a Nehru jacket, this is quite possible because suppose you are called up for interview in the month of April when it's pretty hot, you might as well wear, but not a multicolored Nehru jacket. Panditji, you preferred cream, white or off-white. So you must give the impression that you are a serious person. So if you wear a jacket over and above your pant and shirt, trousers or shirt, then see that it is of the appropriate color. I mentioned about the other things that we have to speak. Body language is very important. I emphasize again and again because I've seen in many cases where the body language, adverse body language, can ruin the prospects of a candidate. So we have covered virtually the whole area of preparation for the interview. If you have few questions, anything? Yeah. Yes, please.
That is related to what is the exact precise difference between all India services and central services? The precise definition between all India services and central services.
It is laid down in the Constitution itself. You see, all India services are services which are common to the central government and the states. And there are three all India services: IAS, Indian Police Service, and Indian Forest Service. Because these services are common to central and the states. Each state has an IAS cadre, an IPS cadre, and a Forest Service cadre. That is the only difference. Whereas central services are those who deal with matters in the central list of the Constitution. You see, when you see the Constitution, there is a union list, there is a state list, and there is a concurrent list. Now, the subjects, like say defense, military, or customs or central excise, this is in the exclusive central list, union list. So that's the difference.
That's the sole difference.
That is, yeah.
Sir, if you have written about table games in your hobbies, table games.
Table games like table tennis.
No, sir. Such as chess and such as carrom. Then what do you think of that?
Well, very good question. In fact, when I went to Mussoorie, my senior directing staff, M.K. Chaturvedi, asked me, do you play chess? My answer was, sir, I never thought about it. This question, suppose you say chess, etc., then remember the Mahabharata story and the role chess played, like the famous Satyajit Ray movie, Shatranj Ki Khilari. Remember that? See, they might ask you something connected with the game, its origin, and its fading popularity. and the concept of gambling. You see, I remember that kind of conversation might lead to philosophical extent. Why does a person buy lottery tickets? Tell me. People buy. The lottery industry is thriving on people buying tickets. There is a weakness in human mind and a fascination for earning money without working. And this can be traced to the Holy Bible. You know, in the Bible, when Adam and Smith committed the original sin, God punished Adam. And he said, and I quote, "Thou shalt earn your bread by the sweat of your brow," unquote. Adam was not happy about it. So, throughout ages, man has been driven by a desire to earn money without working. This cheating, theft, all the crimes which are committed by man are essentially due to this peculiar weakness of human mind, and that is reflected in buying of lottery. So if you say chess, they may ask you about the gambling associated with chess. Take for instance the Chinese. They're a nation of gamblers. During my younger days in Calcutta, in Chinatown, I found always the Chinese, whenever they got little time, they would play mahjong. There's a game called mahjong, which is very popular among the Chinks. Why do they play it? Well, that's the elixir of life. Life has no meaning if there's no gambling. So therefore, and I was told by a Chinese politician once that there's a basic difference between you and us. We can take bold decisions because we are a nation of gamblers, and you are not. You are too cautious, you see. Then I said, how do you say that? He said, you go to the gambling den at Genting Heights near Kuala Lumpur. Who are the people who go there? 90% are Chinese. So, when you say chess, remember, it is an opening to something else. Any other game you have in mind? Carom. Carom really is a pastime. You can't call it a game. But you can say, yes, I enjoy it because it perfects my target shooting. So that means it helps me to decide better if I can put the, what is that called, into the hole. That's what it is. I enjoy it. I enjoy any game which tests my ability to perform. He gave a general reply. Because after all, every game is a proof of your, performance. It's a performing art in a way. So you can say so. Nothing wrong? Okay.
Sir? This side, sir.
Yeah.
So what in case, if suppose the board asks something very personally but highly confusing questions, what in case if we don't select you in this attempt?
You see, what kind of embarrassing questions do you expect? First of all, by and large, the board members are elderly people, sensible people. They would not like to ask you a question that might embarrass you. Why should they do it? Because that will stifle you, That will put you in a shell. Why should they do it? Why are you anticipating this question?
So because nobody tells the reality what actually happens in interview board.
No.
The candidates who have been selected, they said that हमको तो बैठने को भी नहीं बोला, 15 मिनट तो खड़े ही रखा, क्वेश्चन पे क्वेश्चन पूछ रहे थे.
There are lots of myth making about the personality test, mostly by those who succeeded. And these are all things that they might have manufactured with due respect. But you see, there's no record, audio record of what transpired. But I can tell you, the board has a positive bent of mind. They are keen to meet you. They had gone through your DAF. They would sincerely make an effort to estimate your potential and caliber, regardless of your background and what you might have stated in your DAF. So don't be under a notion that you will face a group of intimidating men. No. They are out to pounce on you. No. They are there to help you. This will change your demeanor also. You see, if you are, it's like a goat getting into a slaughterhouse. No. You see, you should be, confident enough of yourself because you have earned the right to be interviewed. So nobody has any right to put embarrassing questions that will adversely affect your exercise of your right. Okay? That point should be there. Right.
So what if one has mentioned more than one as one's hobbies? Although I mentioned 3 hobbies at EAS, and the 3 are factual hobbies. So is there any, should there be any strategy for it? Or
See, answer is, you must be honest. If you have too many hobbies, and if you record it, people may say that he may be jack of all trades, he may not have really any hobby, or just put it like this. Hobbies are generally few, they are not many. By very nature, look at the meaning of the word hobby. Something among many that you pursue as your interest. Stamp collecting, for example, is a hobby. So it is not that you can have a wide range of hobbies. So you should give a few hobbies, 1 or 2, like that. If you say music, yes, in what capacity? Active or passive? I listen to music. Fine. Classical music, modern Western pop music, or whatever. Then you have to explain like that. Or you say, I write poems. Then they may ask you on what subjects. Or if you say, I take part in dancing, Bharatanatyam, this or that. So if you are wise, you should not indicate too many hobbies. Few, but you should be able to stand by it. Yeah.
So reading self-development books is my hobby.
Reading?
Self-development books. Sir, I actually have gone through a handful of books. Yes, whatsoever books I've gone through the family considers self-development. But only limited stock I have read. Is it going to work against? I've read only limited stock, but I've read gone through them.
First, avoid the word limited. It's a matter of judgment. I read books on self-development. I enjoy reading books on self-development. Finish.
So like 8 or 10 books I have read.
Need not say 8 or 10. Why? He said, I enjoy reading books on self-development. Why? Sir, it helps me. Now, they cannot say that the way you behave doesn't prove that. No, they will never say so. They will simply say that yes, the fact they will have a picture of you in mind that here's a man who has read self-development books. That seems to be evident on his face or on his demeanor. That's what they will think about. Okay?
Sir, I have given in my cadet preferences Hindi speaking state first.
Pardon me?
Sir, Hindi speaking state, I have given these states in 5% in my cadet preferences. And I strongly believe that in field administration language plays a crucial role. So does it give the impression that I am not willing to learn other languages?
No, why do you drag this issue of language? I come from a Hindi-speaking region, therefore I have given preference to Hindi-speaking states. That's all. You see, language of district administration everywhere in India, except in some northeastern states, is the local language. In some northeast states like Meghalaya, where I had worked, or Nagaland, where the English is the language. But that kind of English is very different from English that is spoken in England. It's a peculiar local English. But that's a different thing. But you are perfectly right to say that I come from a Hindi-speaking region, and therefore I have given preference to Hindi-speaking states. Absolutely honest reply. You see, honesty is a quality that is sought for. Yeah. You can humbly say, sir, sir, I'd find it difficult to stay away from my country for a long time. One of my batchmates, he was asked the same question. He said, I don't wish to be an exile from my country. You see, and this reply was appreciated. And first of all, this question should not be asked, because if you had given 23rd preference, it would be pointless to ask you this. But if they ask you, are you not interested in foreign affairs? The answer would be, no, sir. I am deeply interested in foreign affairs. And then they might ask you one or two questions related to foreign affairs. Okay. But an honest reply that for some reasons, say obligations to my family, I am not in a position to spend, a long spell abroad. Okay, that would be a truthful account. Many people have given it, and these replies were appreciated. Okay.
अगर किसी ने अपने फोन में वो भी का कुछ लिखा ही ना हो तो उसका कुछ नेगेटिव इम्पैक्ट पड़ेगा?
No. That means you have an open mind. You are free to acquire new hobbies. If they ask you, sir, I have been very busy with my work, you see, but I have some interest in certain matters. I'll pick up hobbies. That's all.
Sir, should we be limited enough to our academic achievements and extracurricular activities?
Would you?
Should we be limited enough to our academic achievements and extracurricular?
You see, it is just a point of reference. You see, your merit, your academic merit has been already tested. Nobody is bothered about the grades you scored or this or that. They would see it to develop a pen picture of you and relate questions to see how you relate your education to the challenges ahead, likely to emerge from the civil service. That's it. So don't bother much about it. Right? Fine? In that case, we move on to the hardware part of the topic. I have exceeded time, but I think we can continue, no problem. I have no problem. This is a dicey subject. How to form opinion on current affairs, national, international, and social issues. So, let us take up the social issues first, On social issues of India, I need not tell you, you are aware of it. What is needed is a balanced view on these subjects. And a view based on law when it comes to certain basic issues like rights of the tribals, rights of the scheduled castes, rights of the backward classes. On these matters, your views must be based on the law of the land. It can't be anything else, right? Women's empowerment and the self-help group movement are very important. Certain issues like adverse sex ratio in India, this is one subject which might come up. Sanitation, and why certain countries are doing better than us in our neighborhood, like Bangladesh. Sanitation, women's empowerment, sex ratio. You find Bangladesh is doing much better. You see the Human Development Report and all that. There's one seminal work on the subject by Professor Jean Droz and Amartya Sen, India and Uncertain Glory. India and Uncertain Glory. It gives you a kind of review of our success and lack of it in areas of social development. Reservation of seats for women in the panchayats. Women's security, for example, measures taken by the government so far, and what should be done to improve the system. If you have any question on this subject, because I guess you are all familiar with the social issues, burning social issues of the country. If you have any specific question, we might discuss.
If I have an opinion that is opposite to the opinion of the interview panel, so what the strategy should I adopt at least to defend myself or to counter them?
You see, you are free to take an opinion, but you have to stand on it.
But last year my friend has given interview.
Hmm.
He's in IPS now. He has a view that is opposite to the interview panel. That was Alkasiro Imam's panel, and at last it went to an argument, and he got very less marks in the interview. So,
what was the subject?
Sorry,
what
sir?
was the subject?
It is regarding some social issues.
Regarding sir?
It is actually defending his subject, so it was against the government.
You see, we should avoid getting dragged into this kind of a discussion. You should gently avoid it. Now, just think of yourself. What could be the serious point of difference? Suppose you appear for interview. What are matters on which you feel very strongly? Tell me, what are the matters on which you feel very strongly? On which you feel very strongly
Sir,
right now. There's something is going wrong in this country, and
so for example, low sex ratio
Pardon?
in the country, low sex ratio in the certain states of India. So,
okay. Now, yes, Haryana. Fine. What will you do about it? Suppose you get angry on this issue. What does it produce? It is the result of a curious mixture of prejudices, past traditions, wrong value systems, and failure to modernize the society. Lack of education. So many things, there are 20 reasons for that. Then why do you should feel so strongly that on this subject you will get into an argument with the board? Now, why are you presuming that the board will say, no, adverse sex ratio is good for the country? Is that they're going to say?
no, sir,
No.
no.
In that case, there is no question of any disagreement.
Sir, but if I say something, if I try to defend myself, it will be.
Yeah, but then please remember, this is not a quiz competition, or it is not a debate. It's not a debate in a college that you have to score a point. No. No way. Perish the thought. You are to present yourself as a rational, sensible young man, willing to bear the burden of administration. That's it. If you feel strongly on anything, I don't think you will be unable to stand by it. You will be certainly able to stand by it. But when you stand by it, state it in a gentle manner. Probably your friend might have offended the board by the manner of his response. But don't offend. That's the one thing I forgot to tell you. Your replies should not be offensive at all. For example, I read somewhere that a person was asked, what do you know of George Bernard Shaw? Many years ago. He said, is there anything that I don't know? And there was a roar of laughter. Don't offend anybody. So, sir, I know a bit of it. You see, please remember one thing. If your English language is based on what is called understatement. When an Englishman says, I have a small cottage in the countryside, it might turn out to be a 30-bedroom, castle. It's just like that. Or if you ask an Englishman, what do you do for living? Oh, a bit of this or that. No, I'm a lawyer. He may turn out to be the biggest attorney of the country. So this understatement is the strength and a peculiar quality of the English language. Have any of you gone through the ELBS series of books, English Language Book Society? If you check the internet, ELBS, there's a book, The Complete Plain Words. Title of the book is Complete Plain Words. The other, Good English, How to Write It. They published around about 20 books, all equally excellent, remarkable. You get an idea that, you see, if you are using English language, must be very sober and balanced. And much depends on your manner of speaking, not the contents of your thought. Please remember this. Okay?
Sir, if the question comes from, for example, if Indo-Pak dialogue process, government decided to continue that dialogue process. So if my opinion is that dialogue should be broken up after the Pathankot incident, so how should I defend myself, or
No.
should I?
I ask you a counter question. Can you choose your neighbors?
Sir?
Can you choose your neighbors?
Countries.
Hmm?
Neighbor countries.
Neighbors. You see, there's a first lesson of diplomacy is geography is economic destiny. Second lesson is that you cannot choose your parents. In the same manner, you cannot choose your neighbors. So, dialogue, contact, consultations are absolutely unavoidable. So, if you say that we should not enter into dialogue, the question will be, how long will you maintain this stand? What will be your reply?
Sir, but
No, not but. I am asking this question, Mr. So-and-so, you seem to be in favor of suspending the dialogue. Could you please tell me what will be the period of suspension of this dialogue?
sir, dialogue is necessary, but
Then you are retracting.
yeah, but previous government followed the same.
Why
strategy.
unnecessarily drag in the previous government? वो पुरानी बात है, वो भूल जाइए.
This way, if I try to defend myself, it will be an argument.
No,
sir.
then in that case, you see, don't defend what is not defendable, which might give an indication of lack of appreciation.
Sir, if my opinion is that dialogue process should be cut out, and if I say dialogue
Yeah.
process should continue,
Answer
it will
this
be a lie,
question.
no, sir.
But how long? Can you guess?
So I should say that for the long time advantage, we should continue with the dialogue process. Is that answer?
You are
should I-
contradicting yourself. If it is necessary in the long run, why not do it in the short run? And somebody may quote Lord Keynes' famous statement, in the long run, we are all dead.
Sir,
What did you say to that? So, if we are talking about Indo-Pak dialogue after Pathankot incident, this is not the first time that it had happened. After attack on Parliament, Kargil, we did talk, keep on talking. So therefore, your problem is imaginary. You are imagining a problem, creating a problem for yourself. by being what you call incoherent. Incoherence is an indication of lack of thinking capacity, lack of logical, bent of mind, if I may say.
Sir,
Yeah.
so sometimes we may land into a situation where we are defending our opinion and may trigger into a situation like we may land into trouble with the questions. So how to manage such
You
situations?
see, most troubles in life are self-created. You see, let's be honest. So therefore, your response should be in a manner that gives no offense to the board. You should appear to be a prudent person. Prudence is a quality. In all official language, correspondence, a man of ordinary prudence is what we mentioned. Should not have done this, should not. So prudence demands that you are polite in your response. Trouble takes place when you appear to be somewhat offensive or stretching your argument beyond a point, when it becomes unsustainable. That unsustainability is the problem, not your difference of opinion. Okay? So you must avoid that. Right? Then you go over to how to form opinion on current affairs, national and international. Okay? Let's quickly run through the international affairs. I mentioned something here. You see, there is a Singaporean diplomat of very high caliber. His name is Kishore Mahbubani. Yeah, great. I'm glad you know it. Kishore is presently Dean of the Lee Kuan Yew School of Public Policy under National University of Singapore. He has written 2 seminal works recently. One is, title of first is The Great Convergence. The second is, Can Singapore Survive? It contains a number of articles. Earlier, he shot into prominence when he wrote his masterpiece, Can Asians Think? It had run into 18 editions, and Dr. Kissinger stated recently that Kishore Mahbubani is one of the 50 most influential strategic thinkers of the world. If you get hold of these books, just glance through it, you get a fair idea of what the global affairs are all about and what are the forces which are shaping international relations. And you have to, here I have tried to do that, you have to understand the basics, because basics are often clouded, camouflaged under slogans like globalization. See? Sustainable development goals, or Millennium Development Goals. The basics are usually kept in the background. So the first thing that I had mentioned here is that you should be very clear of the idea of a nation state. You see, the world today consists of a large number of nation states. I don't think there is any state in the world which does not call itself a nation state. To be a member of the United Nations, you have to be a state. Okay? And you see problems all over the world. Now, some scholars have defined nation states as imagined ideas. Imagined ideas, quote and unquote. A nation is a nation when the people living there think that they are a nation. They constitute a nation. In the year 1940, a Bengali Muslim, A.K. Fazlul Haq, moved at the Lahore session of the Muslim League the Pakistan resolution. He moved the resolution. 30 years later, another Bengali Muslim, Sheikh Mujibur Rahman, moved a resolution that the idea of Pakistan was not founded on reality. It had to be scrapped, and it was scrapped. So, if you look at the hot spots, the problem spots of the world, they relate to the efforts of the people to build a nation state or build nation states on durable basis. And this is the main problem. Nepal, Ukraine, Syria, Iraq, Nigeria, Myanmar, China, Thailand, and Philippines. I have been to most of these countries and I have found that essentially the problems relate to sustain the imagined idea of nationhood. But there are always some groups in each of these countries who feel that they are not adequately, taken care of, or their interests are safeguarded within the framework of the nation state. The case of Madhesis in Nepal is an example. The Nepal is in the process of nation building. After abolition of monarchy, the people of Nepal are engaged in this exercise. The same thing applies to all places. And we have in recent period successful emergence of East Timor in Indonesia, broke away from it. Bangladesh is the only Muslim country that had seceded from another Muslim country. I mentioned this in a meeting at Dhaka, and it provoked a huge laughter. So they are quite happy. This is a unique distinction that you have. The only country that had seceded from another Muslim country. If Kurdistan becomes a reality, this will be a second example. If they succeed in getting away from Turkey, they have been fighting for God knows how many years. So when you are asked about any question relating to any of these areas in neighborhood, you might as well say that these problems relate primarily to nation building efforts, or rather incomplete nation building efforts. Right? Now there's a further problem. Kishore has explained it brutally and frankly. He said that there is a basic contradiction between the concept of nation state and the idea of international cooperation. You see, nation states are driven by their perceived national interest. The word perceived is important. Means what I consider as my perception. And I have the sole right to define my national interest. Now, the concept of sovereignty includes this fundamental right to define my own national interest, right to pursue it, and right to wage war against a particular nation, to preserve and protect my national interest. By invoking this principle, United States launched an attack on Afghanistan, Iraq. So, it is because the state is the sole judge of its decision. It can take the law in its own hand. However, in practice, this right is moderated by multilateral institutions and bilateral agreements which temper this process into a wider framework of conduct of relations and pursuit of respective national interests. Now you see, essentially in the global situation today, it is national interest that is uppermost in the minds of all nations. However, we know the limitations. Therefore, multilateral agencies, institutions are extremely important, like SARC, ASEAN, European Union, and you must study their approaches to regional cooperation within the framework of nation-state system. So all these institutions you must see, and the current problems faced by European Union, like for instance the refugee crisis, Greek and Spanish economic meltdown, and the ASEAN Economic Community, which has already emerged in 2015. The United States-led Trans-Pacific Partnership, TPP, that encompasses Japan, and not China, Japan, South Korea, and other countries in the region, as a counter to the growing Chinese influence. You see, here, you must look at it this way, that ASEAN and other agencies have come up basically as platform for regional cooperation. And the refugee crisis in Europe, for instance, is extremely important. It has created a peculiar situation in Europe. The Europeans feel they are asked to carry the can for the Americans. The Americans intervened in Syria, Iraq, etc., and drove the people out, and they land up at my borders. So I am really facing the consequence of US failures in these areas. So these issues will be very, very important. You've got to know it, right? More importantly, for Indian perspective, the BRICS Bank, which had come up, Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank, which have been recently set up as a kind of counter to the influence of IMF and the World Bank. The whole financial architecture is changing. What would be India's interest? In other words, when you study all this, keep in mind an Indian perspective, right? A related issue is the role of the United Nations Security Council, restructuring of that we have been demanding. So on the whole, India's recent initiatives like say BBIN, Bangladesh, Bhutan, India, Nepal, BIMSTEC, Bay of Bengal Initiative in multi-sectoral technical and economic cooperation, or SARC, or BCIN, Bangladesh, China, India, Myanmar, the Act East policy, and the Asian Highway Project, and the Asian railway project, which is supposed to link up India right up to, etc., right up to Thailand. So these are issues which have to be seen in the context of the American policy of rebalancing Asia. The word rebalance is very important. In other words, it carries a meaning very different from the grammatical meaning of the term. Rebalance means the Americans would like to perpetuate their control and domination of the entire Asia-Pacific region. So they call it rebalance. Means something that has lost its balance recently because of emergence of China, which has to be countered by some kind of institutional arrangements. So a few connected issues are very, very important. If you are opting for foreign service, you must study a little more deeply. One is the Chinese One Belt, One Road initiative, OBOR, that links Xinjiang to the Gwadar port of Balochistan in Pakistan. $46 billion investment, which cuts across parts of occupied China. OBOR, how does it affect India's interest? There's an interesting article in the Times of India 3 days back on this issue. You might like to see. Second, India and ASEAN and our Act East policy. This morning in the Statesman, I found a wonderful article written by Andrew Sheng, a Chinese expert. He pointed out that together, India, China, and the ASEAN could be the real drivers of growth in the world. India's GDP is $2.3 trillion Chinese total GDP is 10.5 trillion. And ASEAN's total GDP is around 2.4 trillion. So together, this area, which has not been badly affected, could be the real engine of growth and stability of the global economy. The second matter that we must read was the new maritime Silk Road project of China, what is called NMSR. This, if you link up One Belt, One Road and new maritime Silk Road, you see the point of convergence is in the Persian Gulf. And that has enormous implication for India, for India's security. And in that context, the US-Iran nuclear deal assumes a tremendous importance. The withdrawal of sanctions will lead to rapid growth of Iran's economy. It has a highly enlightened, literate population. The women of Iran in particular are highly educated. They are in all scientific and technological institutions, and they have acquired enormous intellectual capital, you see, enormous human capability. Iran is the fourth largest producer of oil, and it has the largest reserve, and the second largest reserve of gas. So what is India's interest in Iran is a matter that you must know. Then you come to WTO and the IPR issues, which you are expected to be familiar. Recent initiatives in Africa. You see, in WTO, we are stuck on one issue, agricultural subsidies. And this question may be asked, after the last round of talks, have we gained anything? Where does India stand? In the same manner, where does India stand in the climate change negotiations? What has happened what has transpired in Paris? Have we been benefited? And coming to Africa, the government announced a $10 billion kind of assistance to Africa, where the Chinese are already deeply entrenched. They are in mining, infrastructure, agriculture. They have purchased thousands of hectares of land, producing food grains there, sending them to China. So these are matters which need, I won't say mastery, but you should be familiar. And you should have broad understanding of the issues involved from the Indian perspective, which might be raised during discussion. On Indo-Pak relations, we have already discussed. There is no need. My friend helped me to do so. Okay? And importantly, our relations with China. A mature understanding is expected on the principle that China is an important neighbor. And the Chinese influence in the world is through multi-dimensional sources. Take Thailand. Thaksin Shinawatra was Prime Minister of Thailand. But he is not a Thai, he is a Chinese. You see, the famous Filipino dictator and his wife, glamorous wife, Imelda Marcos, were ousted. And Corazon Aquino took over. Both these families have their roots in China. During my visits to East Asia, I found that the entire economy is dominated by the Chinese. They have influences in Philippines, Thailand, Malaysia, where the Chinese are about 40% of the population. Malaysia, they are the largest kind of ethnic minority other than the Malays. So one must see in the larger context, and the government policy is to expand trade and economic relations, attract Chinese investment, which have the effect of keeping the border issue in the background. And that makes sense. That makes a lot of sense. So, the initiatives of the Chinese, like BRICS Bank, etc., are welcome if they mean additional investment for India. Now, it's a question of how you coordinate your policies with the policies of other countries. So this aspect would require deep understanding, because when you're talking about Act East policy, it means really we're trying to gain access to East Asia. The Chinese, for example, have already built a pipeline network from Rangoon port right up to Yuan in southern China. As you know, the oil is flowing up. So if we move on to expand our trade with Myanmar after restoration of democracy, it would require a kind of multilateral cooperation. We need the support of Thailand, we need the support of Myanmar, etc. So, if a question is asked about the border disputes, you must probably note two terms used. LAC, line of actual control. And on the other side, in Pakistan, we have the LOC, line of control. What's the difference between these two? Could you mention?
This one, the LOC is agreed by
Great.
and it is a status quo. LAC is a status quo between China.
Great. I'm very happy. You see, LOC is the outcome of a treaty, Simla Agreement. Therefore, it had acquired a kind of a sanctity. Therefore, when Kargil took place, Bill Clinton rang up Musharraf that we withdraw. And he did withdraw. You must have read the newspaper reports that when 9/11 took place, Colin Powell picked up his phone and told Musharraf to fall in line, or else I'll send you to Stone Age. You see the implication? I'll send you to Stone Age. This is the language used by Colin Powell. It was quoted in Newsweek and American magazines. So therefore, you see, ultimately it is power that holds. LAC, line of actual control, is something that we have agreed to abide by. Whenever there is intrusions, I'm familiar with that area, there is no fencing or anything. You do not know where you are. You might as well trespass into each other's territory. But there has been an understanding, which is pretty old now, that India and China will maintain, peace and tranquility along the line of actual control. At the same time, take up measures to expand border trade. You see, therefore, there are talks about opening of new, border points, right? Now, having covered the international relations, we may come to some of the global macroeconomic issues. Of the global macroeconomic issues, one that might be raised is the great recession that Europe is facing. Why is it that the crisis of 2007-8 is not showing any sign of, termination? Why is it going on? What is the reason for continuing recession? This is one. This is one major issue. We have discussed about climate change. A related issue is the inequality. You might have seen that in the last Davos World Economic Forum meeting, Oxfam has produced a report. Did any of you see that? Oxfam report on inequality? You have seen that. 62 persons in the world, 62, maybe half of this hall, they own roughly $7.5 trillion of wealth. Just compare the GDP of India, 2.3. So these 62 families own 3 times the GDP of India. And that is, according to Oxfam, is roughly equal to the income of 3.5 billion people of the world, nearly half the population of the world. Now this inequality is a major issue. You may have a essay paper on this if next year or what. Thomas Piketty, who came to Delhi a few days back, a very great, you know about him, Thomas Piketty? Any of you? He spoke at Joe and Jay. Thomas Piketty's book, Capital in the 21st Century. A young man who is hardly 43 years of age, he has penned down a classic which shows why and how this inequality is an obstacle to further development, obstacle to growth and removal of poverty. Because concentration of wealth means mass poverty. Mass poverty means less demand. And that shrinks, reduces, contracts the size of a market. Okay? So the issue of distributive justice is important, not only in the national context, but also in the global context. Right. Now, well, the next few minutes, let's move on to the national scene. Present log jam in the parliament. The parliament has not been functioning. Is an issue that you should study and form your opinion. Then the economic development model that you have accepted and the limitations of GDP approach. GDP growth may not be beyond, what is the phrase? Be all and end all. You see, there's a gentleman by the name Devendra Sharma. He has once spoken to us at the IAS, and he made an interesting statement. He said, "Mera to ye GDP samajh mein nahi aata hai. I cannot understand." He said, you invest money, cause pollution, output is increased, GDP growth. Pollution causes health problems, which leads to more expenditure on health. That is also added to the GDP growth. Deaths also take place, which also adds up to the GDP growth. There's a cost of burning, that keeps the crematorium busy. So the limitations of the GDP approach are explained in Piketty's book, how GDP concept developed in America and how it has become a mantra and how it is not and why it is not sustainable. Okay? From administrative point of view, a bigger issue is the regional imbalance. Rise of left-wing extremism and insurgencies in the Northeast, and the issue of Armed Forces Special Powers Act in Manipur and other areas, including Kashmir. The environment and development debate has been intensified after the odd-even, experiment in Delhi. You must have a clear idea of what is meant by sustainable development. Sir Partho Dasgupta of Cambridge University had written a treatise on discounting development by taking into account the damages, the collateral damages that involvement often causes. It might be useful to study literature on both sides, whether this could be reconciled, environment and development issues. Issues like conservation of forest and environment. I mentioned to you about this complexity of this problem in Agra, for instance. If you go for a cleaner fuel and you subsidize it, you add up really more industries using that cleaner fuel, and the total pollution level doesn't get reduced, you see, remains the same. So there are a number of issues connected with the environment and development debate. Finally, education and human development. It would be useful to go through the United Nations Human Development Index. And where does India stand? That you could download and go through it. It is necessary. It should be in your fingertip. What are the weaknesses of India? Take, for instance, standard of our school education at the primary level, the dropout ratio, computational skills. It's a huge country, therefore you could always produce a good number of brilliant scientists, brilliant minds. But if you look at the average, why is it that we are somewhat lagging behind? So, for this, to get a perception about this whole issues of development, World Bank's annual report, you are aware of it, certainly? WDR, World Development Report of the World Bank, which is on the internet. You see, you need not go through the report. Some part of it is pretty complex, but there are some annexures. One is development index of all member countries. This portion you must download, get printouts, and go through it carefully. Take, for instance, India. It would indicate India's population, growth of population, then total GDP calculated in nominal terms, and then GDP calculated as per the purchasing power parity. By this criteria, Kishore Mahbubani has calculated that the Chinese GDP share in the world is now 16.5%. The American share is 16.2%, calculated in PPP terms. Though in nominal terms, US economy is still larger. So then growth rate, then merchandise export, how much we export, how much is commodity, and what is the share of high tech in our exports. And you compare the percentage of China or any other country, South Korea, Singapore, Malaysia. In other words, if you go through these annexures, you need not go through the main report. You will get a plain picture of where we stand, where the world stands, how different countries are doing. Because these are very basic. Equally important will be the World Innovation Index, where you see our position was about 2 years ago 76th, and we have slipped to 82 or 83. Now that innovation index shows what is our contribution to the global innovation. Now that is an indication of indication of strength of the country's science and technology system. So if you are familiar with these statistics and give a hard look and relate it to the economy, you get a fairly clear picture which will help you to discuss any issues during interval. Well, my conclusion is that it is well nigh impossible to anticipate the kind of subjects that might come up in the interview, as the canvas is vast. One must further note that the board would be keen to see that the candidate has a reasonable capacity of appreciation of current issues of public affairs. When I say reasonable appreciation, means they don't expect mastery over the subject. No way. But reasonable appreciation, okay, which a person conscious of the country's position should have, okay. Current issues of public affairs, public debate on matters domestic and international, and has thought over it, and is able to express his views in a clear, logical way. Rather than correctness of reply, the emphasis is on the degree of confidence and the logic of the proposition. As regards global affairs, you may refer to, I suggested, Kishore Mahabubani's 2 books. You get a fair, reasonable Asian perspective of what is happening in the world. Because I find that we depend on Western media. Economists we read, Financial Times, etc. You get a viewpoint which is not always, in conformity with our interest, our approaches. These 2 books, not very thick, readable, written in excellent English, would prepare you adequately to deal with any issue of international affairs. So, I have completed this portion. If you have any question, I'd like to ask to me.
Could you please repeat the gentleman's name regarding the treatise on environment and development debate? That part, Sarathi. I couldn't recollect the. Could you please repeat the name of the gentleman that wrote a treatise on environment and development debate?
Yeah, you see, you get this reference in EPW. His name is Sir Partha Dasgupta. He is a Cambridge economist who has written a book on discounting development. You see, what he has tried, that if you measure wealth creation or something in terms of GDP only, you miss the harmful effects of a particular measure on the environment. So what he has tried to do is to calculate the losses and set it off against the gains. In other words, what he has propounded is a new kind of benefit cost analysis of projects. That's the one.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Sir, in the education I want to ask, a person who has done undergraduation and post-graduation, what kind of preference he should give to preparation of those subjects?
I couldn't get you.
Sir, if a person has done undergraduation as well as post-graduation, and so what kind of focus he should have on the both?
You see, what is the minimum qualification for graduation? That's it.
But it's a more recent, because they have asked in the form that you should mention the subjects. So
Yeah.
can you expect certain kind of questions from that point of view, the subjects that you have mentioned there?
If you have done, say, post-graduation, obviously you will fill it up, isn't it? And that will give a picture of your academic attainments, your areas of specialization.
So what kind of attention one should pay on preparation of that?
No, I couldn't get you. For the purpose of interview? Yes.
Sir, I want to ask, like, what kind of attention one should pay while preparing for the, to deal with the questions which are related to the undergraduation and as well as the post-graduation?
Okay. Now, if suppose there is consistency, okay? If you have not switched from one subject to another, in that case, there may be a question. Otherwise, if you have done your mechanical engineering or whatever in the graduation level, when you have done your M.Tech in the same subject, no questions are asked. Only when you switch over to something else, they might note. Otherwise, it would be a normal kind of assessment.
Not much question.
No question. At any case, what you have studied is not a matter for the board to bother about. Your skill, please remember, your present skill is reflected in your performance in the examination. That is important. For the board, they know that you have cleared the examination. Your past is a part of your character, your aptitudes, your overall, your kind of temperament. But I don't think you should bother much about it. Unless you have switched over to something else. Suppose you have done your graduation, then you had taken a degree in law. Then they might ask, what really compelled you or impelled you to take up this?
What would be the appropriate answer then?
Pardon me?
What would be the appropriate answer then? If you
Answer
are
is
not-
that-
you can give the other perspective.
Well, answer is very simple. I was fascinated by the role of law in human society. After all, what is human society but institutions run according to law?
Then what about the state you belong? How you prepare that? Do we need to have certain very good information about in that regard about the state we belong to?
Okay, you should say clearly that I come from so-and-so state. If they ask you something about a state, you should be in a position to mention, like growth rate, population, sex ratio, special problems, agriculture, etc. Right?
The subject in graduation
Hmm.
is different, like it's mechanical engineering, and we have taken an optional which is something different, geography or socio, and they ask it somehow that why you chose it when it is already.
You see, rules of the UPSC allowed you to make a choice, and you have exercised that choice. If they ask you, why haven't you opted for a subject which you might have studied? The answer is, sir, whatever I studied equipped me to take up a new subject. That's all.
Sir, sir, you talked about Panchayati Raj system.
Yeah.
Sir, most of the states haven't implemented the constitutional provision under that were mandatory as per the 73rd and 74th constitutional amendment. So it's been more than 20 years, but like finance commissions have been constituted only in a few states. Similarly, other features haven't been working. I mean, devolution of subjects and regular fund haven't been doing well with most of the states. So.
So the answer is that implementation of 73rd Amendment has varied widely according to the degree of commitment shown by the states. In terms of transfer of 29 subjects, some states have done fully, some states haven't done. So therefore, it's an ongoing process. The answer would be yes, a good beginning, but such things do take time. Okay? In that case, gentlemen, ladies and gentlemen, may I just quote a passage from Shakespeare's Julius Caesar. Shakespeare in Julius Caesar propounded a philosophy that is, tomorrow belongs to the people who prepare for it today. I quote, there is a tide in the affairs of men, which, when at the flood, leads on to fortune. Omitted all their voyage in life is bound in shallows and miseries. On such a full sea are we now afloat, and we must take the current when it serves, or else our ventures will fail. Unquote. Ladies and gentlemen, I have enjoyed talking to you, and to quote Shakespeare again, for lending me your ears and for suffering me for over 3 hours. I thank you and I wish you great success in your endeavors. If whatever I said is of some use, I'll feel my efforts amply rewarded. Goodbye.